So this is the second session for today. Normally I have started with the technique demo, but this time I want to make sure that I have enough time and energy to finish this, and then maybe go wild with the technique demo, maybe not. Who knows, who cares? Let's see what happens. So, final touches. What do we absolutely need here? The blocking area here doesn't perfectly match the outline, so I'm going to work a bit on that. Might do that back here as well, but honestly, might not be that necessary. The city is going to need some detailing and texturing, and then I think in general we are going to want some sort of texture layer to all of this. As I recall, I did add some sort of we must have crashed, must have been lost in the crash. I'm going to add some sort of scratchy texture layers on top of the foreground and the background, and probably on top of the character as well. Hello, Bone Miser. Thank you for missing me. I hope you do enjoy the work here. So we are going to be working on the foreground, and we are going to be working on the colors, and we are going to be working on the blocking layer. So let's get out our relatively small eraser here. Really, the outline here is extremely weak. It's more of a sketch than a final outline, so I might work on it a little bit with the ink tool as well. That's a bit weird. It seems like the overlying layers are not quite as large. That's not something that I would expect, because I love inheritance layers, as you know, and that easily leads to, just doing some bold coloring out of the bounds of the line art, which is not going to be visible on the layers that inherit transparency. So doing some fixes here is going to be more work than it usually would be, but that's why we have an entire session for this. So putting in some white there was helpful. Erase some of that here as well. Like I think I mentioned at some point, I am switching back and forth between drawing mode and eraser mode on a relatively small airbrush brush. So this lets me switch between adding and subtracting with the press of a button. Unfortunately, the way that my workstation is set up, I have to have my arms crossed. So the keyboard is on the right side, and the drawing tablet is on the left side. And of course, since I am right-handed, I am drawing with my right hand and I am clicking the E button or pressing the E button with my left hand. Not quite ideal. It might be that I was actually working with a selection instead of layer inheritance on Monday. I was demonstrating those kind of things. I might have made an effort to use something that I usually wouldn't. So that would explain. I probably used a selection, selected a previous selection, and things got cut down, as we saw on some project recently. I think it was working on this drawing and working on the base colors for Ina. So what I ended up doing there was saving the original selection that I used to set up the base layer, and then just copying that over and over and moving it around. Oh, what is going on with this here? Where is the green? If I erase here, oh, it's the mountain. Interesting. And I'm going to have to take a look at the mountains. No? Where is it? It is in here. Inline, outline. It is under colors. Well, seems that I did that in some sort of a weird way where I don't. I do have white here. So why is adding erasing should remove? Oh, yeah. I was just goofing. Maybe I misclicked the eraser or something like that. I thought I had the eraser off and it was still removing color. So everything is as it's supposed to be. I was the one making some sort of a mistake. A surprising amount of holes here. That's probably because this was indeed the last component of the Monday stream, and I was getting tired at that point. Hmm? Something a bit weird going on there as well. The border here is pixel perfect, very sharp. It doesn't go into transparencies. It cuts off almost instantly. So this has to be some sort of selection phenomenon going on here. Yeah, this had a selection for it, which has is not quite perfect. So let's not use the selection. Let's use the transparency, the inheritance. So so here we can see where we still have too much white. A direct work around this would be to Never mind. I was... so this is the empty layer. And click away from the eraser. So yes, this is the function that I wanted to have. So I can just add some dark grain below everything else. So I can adjust the borders here a little bit, not have these tiny white flecks between the outline and the color. After that, I'm going to need some more erasing here. And then probably something similar now down here. When I use a darker color, it blends into the outline here. So it doesn't look as out of place as it might if I... doesn't look as out of place with the shading as it might in some other case. The stone blocks here are extremely green. I don't think I want to have them as green. Let's make it even darker, too dark. I think I'm going to probably want some sort of a gray overlay on top of all of this. There's some white over there and over there. So I'm going to turn this again into a hard light layer, and I'm going to fill it with mid gray, so it only affects thing. Now here's a problem. I wanted to make this more gray, but if I use a hard light layer, the scale of white to black isn't going to actually do that. It's going to affect its lighting, so I cannot use that. Let's see what the color function does. Yeah, the color function seems to be a good way to overlay this with gray. Since I don't have everything grouped up into their own groups here, I'm going to have to do some manual fiddling here. If I had all of the walls here grouped separately, I could just pick that group and go wild with it. Fortunately, that is not the case. But the wall is drawn very sketchily in any case, so changing the color, rough color, is going to be the most important part in any case. So even if it's not perfectly within the lines here, it's not going to be that much of a problem for me. So that's looking kind of good. Here I'm going to put in some gray over there and over here. So now there's a fundamental color change. And honestly, I think I might use some slightly lighter gray, but I'm going to gray out this the sidewalk here as well. I don't think that's supposed to be greenish either. No, this is on the wrong layer. No wonder it was barely coming up, if at all. So put those back in. Slightly darker. And then let's get back into our gray overlay here. And let's use a slightly lighter gray overlay. Work this over. And this side as well. I no longer have the photo in front of me, so it might be that these might have been somehow slightly greenish. Maybe I drew them like that because of that. But just looking at it aesthetically, I don't think they should be grayish. I think they should be gray. There's something going on with the outlines as well. A lot of them are grainer than I would like them to be. So I am going to... So if the outlines ended up being grain as well, then this has to have been some sort of a deliberate action on Monday. Let's turn them a bit more gray. There's probably some grain going on there as well. I want to gray out. So then I'm going to try out adding a sort of fixing it in post shadow layer. Turn this into a hard light layer. Fill it with the medium gray. I'm getting a lot of double clicks here when I don't want to. Don't know what's up with that. So some more dark in areas that are just dark. I'm going to jack down the opacity a bit. And get to work. That part is going to be quite dark. Be a bit of an angle here. These bits here on the sidewalk as well. I'm going to get darker. I wonder if there's a way to configure the scale here. It seems to be logarithmic. So especially when you are working on the smaller end of the brush size scale, it's very easy to accidentally go far too far with the structure, with the shading here. So then we are also going to need some shadow at and below the interface with the sidewalk. like this. Then a smaller brush. And again a smaller brush. And again a smaller brush. So that's looking kind of nice. I think we're going to need some extra shadow at the interface here. Not quite sure. This would be relatively in the shadow, in the light. I think we need some sort of texturing border here so that it has more of a color, contrast to it. Generally, make everything on this side a bit darker as well, I think. I think that's going to be a good idea. It's going to be in the sun as such, so I shouldn't actually make it entirely dark. But partially from a compositional standpoint, we have a lot of bright things over here, and we have shadows on the other side. And let's say for security, since I'm going to make a computer intensive change here, turn on Ina again. No, that was for paint layers 63. Here is Ina. So we keep having this light dark contrast, and for aesthetic reasons I'd like to have more of that down here as well. So I'm going to make the foreground in general a bit darker and have highlights to it more on the sun side. So that's looking kind of good. Let's turn Ina off again, and what is paint layer 63? This has something in it. Oh, this is the texture layer. It was just turned off. That's probably a positive. Although we might try playing around with its nature, I'm going to try making it a hard light layer. I didn't notice the difference, to be honest. Let's delete it and rework it. I'm going to start a new group here for texture. Oh, hard light is not going to work since it's not part of a group. So I'm going to have to do it manually in any case. So let's pick out a brownish gray like this. Check down our opacity on the brush, and then pick out the. Actually, let's try using the bundle of pencils for this. As you know, I love doing it. Yes, we can layer inherit this whole group. So now I can boldly texture with this. Maybe not quite that boldly. Let's jack down the opacity so that I can use a bit more pressure without making it quite as hard. This is going to give it some definition. We are going to want a fairly high amount of texture on the wall as well. Right now this is all black, and once I am done with the texturing, I'm going to overlay with a white, just to, you know, white out the absurd amount of black here. And after that I'm going to sort of color it in. Giving it a bit of structure with the shading here. Not doing a particularly good job at it. I'm just, you know, lazily doing it. This is going to be relatively minimal once it's done anyway. It looks much stronger now than it will once it's finished. Take away some of this texture and replace it with a bit of a different direction. I think I want to have this texture be more or less perpendicular to the texture of the rocks. That way it'll subtly stand out once I'm done with the texturing here. Needs some here as well, again with a slightly lower opacity, so that I can use more force. And then a small amount on the concrete here. It's going to be less texture to it since it's not it's poured, so it doesn't have that sort of natural texture to it. Kind of, even this kind of sort of lazy texturing is going to help with making things look less less plasticky and airbrushed. As I am sure you have seen at some point, many, you know, relatively bad artists will end up making their work look extremely plasticky. Not really what you want to have. How am I going to go about this? Do I actually want to go around coloring everything in again? I don't actually think so. I don't think I want a I don't want to do the same thing that I did with the water here. For the water, it wasn't a problem at all. Just the texturing was basically the shading for the water. I think up here it's going to be much more of a problem. So I'm going to check down the opacity on this. And I think that's about it. That's going to be well enough. I'm going to start a new outline layer. And on this layer, I am going to think about using the ink brush for this once it's done saving. Or is it? Yeah, it is done saving. So particularly the outline here is sort of uneven. So I'm going to take quite a dark color and a small ink brush, and I am going to work it over on a new layer so that I don't actually damage anything on the previous layers. As you might have noticed in the barrel demonstration, I think that was yesterday. No, that was the day before yesterday. The ink brushes are extremely sensitive to, chicken scratching. You're going to end up with a pretty bad looking line art if you do a scratchy job with this tool. So you want to have either extremely bold movements and then just keep doing it until you get it right, or if possible, or if it fits the intention, slow lines like this where you are in constant contact with the tablet. At this point, I am going to actually check down the size of my tool. Ideally, you would like to have more gradation to it, but working at this scale, going from 3 to 2 pixels, you can't really do much with it. The point is that things that are further away are usually a bit more hazy. So line weight is something that you can use to signify that. So you have thinner outlines for things that are further away. This can work extremely effectively in character art as well. It's not something that I am particularly good at, but I have seen some character art that has been massively improved by using that method. It looked very dynamic. I think the outline to the rocks here is probably fine, but I'm going to work it over anyway. I don't think the inner lines are going to need any of this, and I'm not going to do it for the more of the background layers anyway. Oh, that's just black. I think it's going to be fine like this. So, what else do we want to work on? No, that is actually a part of the outlines. Since this here is looking extremely scratchy, that's not something that I want to have here. I'm going to rotate a lot, and then I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to draw it in again. More strongly. In black, just straight up black. Like this. And I think I had a bit of a pencil outline to this as well. Definitely there's some coloring affecting it. Let's do it this way around. There's a bold line. Let's look at that. Is that going to be... I think I only need it down here, and at that point I don't really have to pay that much attention to it. So turning this gray as well. We don't really want any grain here. It's fairly minimal to begin with, and I think it's going to be fine like that. So I think the foreground is going to be more or less done here. Might as well start a new group. Again called texture. And use the bundle of stencils again. But it has to be quite small this time. Let's see how this is going to work. So the idea is that I'm going to have sort of vertical texturing on what is supposed to be the walls of the buildings. And then I'm going to have some horizontal on the roofs. So the combined effect is supposed to be that they will look as if they have different facets to them. But the idea is to give this impression without actually drawing any detail here. For, you know, work-saving reasons and reasons of prominence, so that the foreground, when it's much more worked over and detailed, is going to sort of pop from the background, while still giving the impression that there is some detail in the background, although I have not actually drawn in any. For artists who are good at this kind of fake detail, the work ends up looking better than some others who have made more effort but done a comparatively bad job at the effort. Of course, again, if you are actually Ilya Repin and you are capable of painting extremely high quality, extreme high quality and extreme detail at the same time, it's not going to affect you. But I don't think anyone whose name is Ilya Repin and who is willing to work for 10 years on one painting is going to be taking advice from me anyway. So I guess to recap, thinking of actual top professionals, masters, they will probably make it look better with the actual detail. I don't think that any of Jerepin's works would have been better if he had faked in some of the detail instead of actually drawing it in. But for, you know, comics level and things like that, let's say medium level professionals are probably still better off indicating rather than drawing. And probably for anyone who is taking advice from me, it's definitely going to be the case. So now we have sort of the walls. the next step is going to be to try to work in the root. So this time it's going to be in this direction. And it's going to be, as brushwork, it's going to be much easier since the rows are going in this direction. At the end of it, we are going to shade the texture layer as well. So we are going to have some, contrast of highlight and shadow on the texturing here, which is supposed to give it more of a sense of volume. How well that's going to work out is a question of my skills, and of course that we'll see that in maybe half an hour at most. Some rows here, and I think that's it for the city. Maybe a little bit up here. So just like this, I think it already makes it a little bit more structured. The next thing to try would be, of course, to play around with the opacity. Does it have a positive effect? Not necessarily. And of course, we can't use this as a hard light layer since it's on its own group. So what we can do is group these up, and then we can have maybe a layer, maybe a group. That layer inherits from them, and now we can use. I think we can even use a hard light layer at this point. Let's check it out. Hard light and using medium black. There doesn't seem to be anything happening. So I'm not sure what this is doing, if anything. Let's see if we turn it into a normal layer, does it start working normally? No, I think the, oh no, it does. There's something weird going on here. So right now, this is a normal layer that has alpha inheritance, but it somehow somehow the hard light system doesn't work. Well, let's start airbrushing then. We are going to have a sort of a highlight on. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Oh no, it's in erase. So here we are. Sort of a sand color highlight over here. And then we are going to have some sand color highlights up here and up here. And very slightly on the top here. But then there is going to be some sand colored shadows sort of behind here. So let's do the shadows first, since there's going to be a bit less of them. not a huge difference. But in contrast with the highlights, there's going to be a bit more visual impact to it. I'm going to put the highlights on a different layer so I can easily, once again, brush them in and out. Maybe other way around, so that now that I have made more of a delicate effort for the shadows, I can use a stronger hand for the highlights here. Or something like this. Let's compare texture with no texture. I'd say the effect is relatively mild, but definitely positive. So that's the city done. Then we have the mountains behind. So the mountains in front are within the texture group here. So I am going to keep working on this and give the mountains some texture in the with the same method here. Not that strong. I want it sort of gray and relatively low opacity. Actually, let's go straight black. It's going to be drawn over anyway. Let's turn off the haze for a moment, and to make it easier to see things here. Again, sort of taking in some contours with the texture here. Contours that I have not actually thought about and that I have not actually drawn in. But that are going to give it that subtle sense of something actually happening here. There are some coloring errors there, but I'm not going to work on it. I think no, it's going to be visible. I am going to fix it up a little bit. This is going to be a white layer, yes, and I am going to brush in some white at the borders here. Maybe with the airbrush so that we get a more delicate edge to it. I am editing the white base layer here that all of the color layers are inheriting their transparency from. So when I add material here, all of the coloring outside of the lines that I did on the layers on top of it is going to show. Since in areas that are transparent in this layer do contain information, but it doesn't show, which is very useful for exactly this kind of last minute fixes. bit in there, a little bit extra there, a little bit less there. Fill in a little bit here, and I think that's going to be it for the fixes on this layer. Although we could add in some texture on the beach here, but I think it should be a different kind of texture than the we don't want that. We probably don't want that there either. And up here as well. This is the kind of problems that you run into when you feature create your project. This was supposed to, the original plan was to have a different sketch for every day of the week. As you can see, this is obviously not what happened. And because of that, the early components here are a lot more sketchy than the later components ended up being. So I have to do a fair amount of post-fixing here. That seems like a spam bot. I am going to have to probably ban it and how do I do this? Ban. And probably blacklist the message if I remember to. So getting back to work. That was not what I wanted. I wanted the reverse of that. So here we are. Maybe that is supposed to be a mountain in the back. Who knows? I think I might try using the soft pencil as the texture for the beach. It's got this sort of grainy structure to it. So if I jack down the opacity enough, use it on the beach, it's going to give this sort of a grainy look to it with a low enough opacity. I think it's going to look fine. The soft pencil is a pretty standard tool, but I think it's surprisingly situational for something that you might want to use immediately. That's I think a bit part of sort of a pitfall, maybe for new Krita users. I don't think that it's a bad brush as such. I think it's a pretty good one, but it's easy to use it for something that it's not really suited for. So now let's erase some of the city texturing up here, or the lack of city texturing up here. So then I think we can use a couple of new inheritance layers for this. So we are going to need a relatively dark green, and I'm going to, I don't think it's going to have much of an effect, if any. Oh, we are in the erase mode again. There's a bit of a problem here. Where the erase mode doesn't seem to turn on and off when I am too far away from the screen with the pen. And there's a bit of somehow switching between the eraser function and the eraser setting for some reason. I'm not quite sure what the difference is, so it's probably user error, but can't be sure. No, that's not what I wanted to switch to. And then we can have some sort of, I guess kind of grayish areas for the highlights. These are going to be on the sun side of the structure. So mostly these sort of ridges here. There's going to be some here, some here. Some on the faces here. So I'm imagining these as sort of, erosion ridges. It doesn't really have to be all that well thought out or detailed, since this is a vague background anyway. So, and then let's put in the haze again. And I think that's going to look just fine for the beach here. Then we have the mountains behind. I think we're going to have to work on the whiteout again a little bit. Some away here. Add in some here. The lines here, the inside line work here is a bit too brownish, I think. But we can fix that if necessary. from here. And then some away here, and I think it's going to be fine like this. And we can turn off the haze again and just have another texture group here. After this, I think I'm going to work on texturing enough, and after that maybe add in some clouds. I'm not entirely convinced that I want to have any, but they might come in handy. And then we need maybe a couple of inheritance layers. Oh, I don't know if we do, honestly. I think once we put in the relatively strong haze, this is going to look just fine. Yeah, you can save a couple of layers here. Now then, time for another manual save. And what is copy of take one? That's the structure. I'm going to rename it, even though I'm not going to use it anymore. So, texture layer. This has to take in some layer inheritance, and let's test it out. It is working as designed. So, at this point, we want some, textile texture to the. So I'm going to make texture character, and then I am going to have another group that's going to be texture clothes. Both of them inherit their layers, and I think the texture layer I'm going to use this to give the clothes some directionality. Here I am curving them in opposite directions for these components. So this is sort of going to add to the sense of direction from the shadowing. So I am pulling with the stylus in the direction that the textile is being pulled. So then we are going to I think the eraser setting saves itself. So when I change from the airbrush to the texture or back, it keeps that selection. So here we are going to have some sand color to this. Make it a lot milder. But then sort of darken it in places. And the same on the on the dress layer. Make it a lot milder in a lot of places. But then we might want to make it a bit darker in some places. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. So here we are. This needs to be even a bit darker. And I think we are going to need to erase a little bit there. It's gone out of the bounds a little bit, I think. Yes. So what is the actual effect of the texture layer? Barely noticeable, but I think it's a positive effect. That's if I didn't think it was a positive effect, I wouldn't do it. So then what kind of textures might we want on our character art here? I'm going to use the bundle texture again for the hair, since it is sort of built out of lines. But I am going to use the soft pencil brush for the skin, with the intention of having a sort of skin pore kind of texture to it. It's going to have to be extremely mild. I don't even want 5%. I don't think that's still too much. I'm going to need its own layer with low opacity for it. I think it's going to have a bit of a positive effect to it, even if the effect is quite mild. I'm going to use the same texture for the shoes here, since they are sort of shiny leather. They aren't supposed to have any sort of directionality to them. And the effect is sort of a deepening of the color even at this point, before we have really started working with it. I'm going to add a couple of inheritance layers, mostly to use with the hair. So I'm going to use an extremely dark purple instead of just plain black for some areas. Particularly here, where it's going to be much less of an effect. And then I'm going to use a sort of very, very light positive violet for the areas where we do want the texture to maybe pop out a little bit. So that's a bit too strong on the character portion here, so I am going to add a stronger light texture where we want our highlights to be. So, is it now a positive effect? Yeah, I think it is. It turns the hair into a sort of deeper, more saturated color here. And I think that this is a net positive to have. Yeah, I think it's positive pretty much everywhere. So at this point, we are more or less finished. It has been about an hour into this segment, and at this point, I'm going to save manually once again, and then have a look at the clouds. Is there actually something that I can do a relatively simple job of? The fences here are something that I did not end up drawing in. I don't think they are necessary. Of course, they are there in the actual location, but I removed some buildings down here anyway, so it's not like I did a good job drawing this actual location. So, in the photo, we had clouds down here. I think what I'm going to do is take a look at drawing in this one cloud here, so that we have a sort of falling curve here between the we have foreground. In the foreground we have the rocks, we have the character, and then we have a sort of empty area in the foreground that is filled in with the background and the clouds, and then this top left triangle here is going to be just empty space for the sake of having room to breathe. So a bit of a composition thing. So we have this sort of top left against bottom right. We have it here in the general composition. We have it here in the hat. We have it here in the hair. Position of the character is sort of perpendicular to that. And then we have a sort of a competing structure here with the curve of the beach. It's sort of similar. They don't quite clash, but the only stronger contrast with the composition is here in the character, which should draw the viewer's eye towards the character, and that's of course exactly what we want. So let's see if we can get a nice looking cloud drawn up today. So we are going to want to have a bounding box for it. The way that I drew it here was more like this, but I don't think the cloud is going to be a box that's angled towards the horizon. If anything, it might be a V form like this. Let's start with that. Then we'd like to have some sort of broader structure to it. I'm just going to start drawing in these like boxes as clumps of something. This is a point at which it would be a great idea to look up some actual clouds if we were doing a prestige project, or if we had planned on doing a prestige project. I think this is going to end up being more or less a prestige project. In any case, it's going to be something like 10 hours of work into it. Probably more than that. I'm going to have to check it afterwards. But this is conceptually, this is supposed to be not really a prestige project. This is supposed to be more of a just drawing for fun. Some more protrusions. The thing about the sort of protrusions in clouds is that they get some very dramatic lighting under certain conditions. think the upper side is going to be relatively simple. So turning these layers down. I don't know if I'm going to need any more in the sketch. I'm just start with the drawing. The colors. And then the lines. We're almost up to 200 layers here, and that is after decimating some of it to make space after the position of the cursor started acting up at some point. So if you end up using this kind of methods, you will end up with quite large lists of layers. So if you don't have a strong computer, well, mine isn't really any kind of, you know, gaming monster anyway. But if you have an even weaker computer than me, then working like this might become a problem. And at that point, you might want to start merging layers that you have already finished with. Like at this point, if I've decided that I am done with all of the foregrounds and on the mountains, I could just merge everything together. That way it will take a lot less computer resources for them to hang around. You might have noticed that I made a sort of took a halfway approach, mixing in some half-assing here with some thinking and some construction. I think that's probably a good way to go about it. When it's a thing that you're not familiar with. I don't know really know cloud, so I have made an effort to get something vaguely right. That there's some structure to them, but other than that, it's very sketchy, and it's probably going to be So this is going to be relatively far in the west. We are looking in from the east, so the highlights are going to be along these sides. That's a bit. I want let's switch off the eraser for this. Take the airbrush and then use the eraser for this and make it a lot smaller. So we are going to have highlights sort of on this side of the structure. So highlights are on the side that is facing the sun. And in this drawing, the clouds are on the opposite side of the sun from us. Sort of draw that in a bit here. How does that work? So we have our camera is here. Here's the rocks, here's the banana. And the clouds are going to be somewhere around here. And since the light is here, it is hitting our character from behind, but it is hitting the clouds from the front. So because of that, the highlights are going to be on quite visible to us, unlike with Ina there. Going to be some highlighting going on the edges here, not that strongly. The main highlights. There's probably going to be a bit of a highlight here as well. Let's keep this a bit weaker. Don't want to make it look too pillowy, as That's looking pretty good. Then I am going to add in another hard light layer for the actual hard shadows to the amount that we have any here. So let's turn off the sketch again. Looking kind of like an airship here. I think we want to turn maybe not that one. So shadows definitely want to have a sort of weaker tint to them than maybe weaker here and stronger in this here. And then maybe the entire group. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine. Then I am going to use some the lines are going to be quite faint, so I'm going to use the G pen since it can get very functional lines even when it's quite thin. So I am going to put in the sketch layer again, but turn the opacity down. Turn this opacity up for a while. Actually, I'm going to do a bit of a trick here. I'm going to give it a black background. That way I have a good strong contrast. This is a trick that I often use, but I have not shown off in the project yet. Actually, let's not make it that strong. Let's make it sort of bluish background. Then when we start lining it in, we still have a contrast with both the inside and the outside. So here we are. And then it's just a question of getting the sort of bold lines that you want to have for your outlines. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so that I can throw my arm around a little bit more. I'm still mixing up, whole arm and wrist movements. I think having a sort of an arm cam might be useful, for particularly for username Peak, who was wondering about using the wrist versus the shoulder. I have sort of now that I've thought more about it, I guess I have three positions for the arm. One of them is just like this, docked in. So this would be my writing position. As we speak, my elbow is resting on my knee, and my wrist is docked on into the side of the screen. The other one would be then like this. Here I am whipping my shoulder. This is quite good for, getting a specific kind of curve. And then, of course, the final one is just, full arm, not really whipping the shoulder, but still using the entire arm to draw. I guess the second and third of those might count as drawing from the shoulder, to use the terminology from before. here I am going to have to make this as one segment, then move around a little bit. Here I have sort of in-between status. I have my elbow on my knee, but I'm not turning my wrist, I am using my upper arm to move my arm around. So then we can turn the purple out, off, and the sketch off. I don't think I want to turn down the opacity on the outline. Instead, I think that I want to have a sort of a bluish tint to it. Quite a light tint on this side here, where we are more on getting the highlight. So almost right down to having the background color as the outline color. So it almost disappears, but not quite. Then I think we want to have a bit of the background sky color everywhere. But then we want to have sort of a layering of a darker grayish blue on the shadowy side of the cloud. Maybe we'll move it around a little bit for the composition. Something like that. I think that's going to be fine. So that is the cloud filled in. Everything is color corrected and textured. So I think this is going to be finished at this point. So let's stop the recording for now.